Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adobe Live. I'm Flynn Tracy, and I'm very excited to be joined today by my good friend, Stephen Grace. Stephen, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I was going to say, this is like our yearly stream. We'll just do a stream once a year. We did one last year.
Exactly. A new decade, new stream, yeah.
Right, exactly. See you in 2021. Keep an eye out for that. Same place, same channel. It is great to hang out with you, and also all of you in chat as well. Stephanie, nice to see you. Dee, Johanna, thank you for looking after us today. Our fantastic moderator. She'll be dropping all the links into all the things that we mentioned, and Festus is in the house as well. That's great. If you're watching this anywhere other than Behance, jump over to Behance. That's the live chat that we're using. Come along and say hello. We love to hear like where you're from and what you're up to. It's Friday here in Sydney, which is nice. It's always Victoria is also in the chat. She says hi, Stephen.
A fellow streamer.
A fellow streamer, absolutely. Anna as well. First time here. Great to have you. So you can ask questions as we're going along. We're going to be having a lot of fun today. We're here for about 90 minutes. And I think that's kind of everything you need to know from me. Stephen, for those that aren't as aware of your work and all the wonderful things you do in the world of design, what's your Stephen Grace elevator pitch? Who are you and what do you do?
I'm 5'11". I have a great personality. I am a graphic designer, and I work primarily in branding and all the sort of expressions that has. So that can be copywriting, design, motion. Sometimes some digital stuff. Try and sort of cover the breadth of graphic design and really focusing on branding and all the ways that lives in the world.
Yeah, awesome. Super cool. And you work at Christopher Doyle Co, which I've been talking about very biasly, saying one of my absolute favorite design studios, definitely favorite people in the world working there. So can you tell us a little bit about Christopher Doyle Co? And I'll jump over to your screen as well, so have some visual aids there. Awesome.
Sure. So I work at Christopher Doyle Co. We're a creative studio in Sydney. There's 5 of us there, headed by Christopher Doyle, as the name would suggest.
That's a lucky coincidence.
I know, it was so lucky because he actually named the company before he joined, so I just was very lucky. We do a mix of sort of stuff. This is like a sort of an overview, I guess, of the work that we do, but it covers sort of brand campaign stuff and across industries. It might be sort of more arts work, or we've worked with Spotify or smaller sort of up and coming businesses. Some personal projects in there as well. I did just pull up a few projects that I thought it might be interesting to talk through. The Institute of Many is sort of a platform and grassroots movement for people living with HIV. Started in Australia, but is sort of a digital platform, and so is globally sort of accessible to people across the world living with HIV. And it's a sort of community-based org that we really liked, and so we did a brand for, I think, 2 years ago now. And I guess just seeing all the ways that this can express through tone of voice, through sort of posters and sort of brand expression. I guess, we're really keen to, have our branding kind of go beyond just logos, and how does that sort of express through how you talk, or what does it look like with photography, or so I think there's lots of, that's sort of how we like to, I think, approach the work that we do in terms of branding. It's more than just a singular sort of logo, which obviously has its place and can be very beautiful. But the way we like to approach it is really from like a holistic perspective.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the Institute of Many, and I guess in here as well on display are a lot of mock-ups, which will be the cause for later discussion. Mm-hmm. And another one I grabbed was Spotify 2018 Wrap campaign. Spotify Australia, New Zealand is a client of ours, and we do a lot of sort of writing and campaign work for them. And at the end of every year, they do a sort of wrap-up project of the year where they sort of take the year and events and music and sort of merge them together. So we always have a lot of fun writing on this one. I mean, these are all very 2018 references and very Australian, so I apologise for anyone overseas.
It's a bit of an in-joke there with the sales, which is great. But yeah.
Yes. And ScoMo, I mean, yeah, all these are very Australian references. So maybe that can be for the Q&A halfway through. I can walk through all the writing for
all the puns, audience. Like all the inside jokes.
Exactly. But I guess all of this stuff's a really good example of then how we take the work that is real, but we end up mocking it up. And it's a very common thing in terms of needing to show the work. You don't want to show it as flat. You want to show it with a real world context. It was also real, but it's also very hard to get out there and necessarily shoot everything and get it, get that photograph. So we really love mock-ups for that reason.
So so even when things are like, these things were all around in the world, like the bus shelters and billboards and all that sort of stuff, even then the work that makes it into the portfolio will be mock-ups.
Pretty much. I mean, I feel like that's pretty common for the majority of people. If it's even I guess before the work becomes real, mock-ups are just really powerful to even get work over the line or present work because it does show it in that real world context, and it really gives it sort of a like tangibility to the work that it's hard to get just through sort of flat graphics, I guess, on a page. So we love them for I guess presenting work, but also when you go to promote work at the end, it's often a lot easier to sort of do a mock-up, and I think the sort of recurring joke is the tote bag mock-up of a brand, like it's not a real brand unless you've got a tote bag. So I guess that has some truth in it, in the way that everyone knows that there is some deep truths with the mock-up and the power of them, I guess, to convey a brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially I think for students or freelancers or people that are trying to build out their portfolio as well. And this is obviously a nice segue into what we're doing today. Very conveniently, we're showing these mock-ups. It's a great thing to do as well, to like show like this is what it will look in situ. So much better than like flat on a page. And it's also good for you as well to see, like you might not have much experience creating billboards or bus shelter design, which is very different. It's not just a big poster, right? Like it needs to be legible, like people might be driving past at a certain speed. There's a lot of things to consider.
Definitely, yeah. And it's, you're spot on, I think, with all of that. It does really put it into the real world, and it helps you sort of think about how that would actually live if you walk past that. Is that something that you would read or look at? It really just helps, I think, all around. These ones, this one here is actually shot in Sydney at like near Central Station. And so we did commission a photographer to shoot a bunch of sort of bus shelters through the city, and then took those in and we converted them into editable mock-ups, which is, I guess, a similar process that I'll take you through today. Sort of taking an image and building that into a mock-up. Yeah,
awesome. Cool. Well, that's great. We have a bunch of people. Ines from Portugal as well. Hey, R&B as well there. Melanie saying retro. I think that was to the previous project, with the kind of effect over everything, which was super cool. It's great to have you all in here. We are going to be covering mock-ups. We're going to be mocking up your work. And so those that are familiar with the stream will know that we have a Q&A break at like about halfway. And so there's just a little timer up there that kind of times down. But feel free to ask questions as we're going along, particularly technical questions. Why are you doing it that way? Anything like that, any sort of questions that you have. And feel free to ask as we're going along. But do you want to get started? Do you want to jump into it?
Sure. I will note as well that in the corner here, there will be some little shortcuts appearing as I do them. So any sort of combination shortcut is appearing there, but obviously feel free to jump in and ask. I sometimes get a little bit happy with that. So I will probably, might move sort of quickly. So I guess that's just an easy way to follow along, using that sort of corner in case things are moving around. But please ask me to slow down or repeat anything as well.
Yeah, awesome.
So this is what we're sort of going to work towards today. And I think it's always good, I guess, to see where we're going to go, and then we can also create that from scratch. But I wanted to show where we're headed. Just gives you a good indication of what we're going to work on. So the actual image behind all of this is this one here. And then on top of that, we're going to build the frame in, some shadows underneath it, and then just get a whole lot of detail around this as well. I think there's a whole lot of sort of touches and things on it which try and make it sort of blend into the environment. So we're going to try and recreate those now. So we're just going to start by making a new document called live. With Laugh Love Mockup is the new.
Is that your favorite quote?
Yeah, it is now. It'll be on t-shirts at no time. Mocked up on t-shirts, so it won't be for sale. So I have pulled a few images here, which I'll just jump back into Safari because I've pulled some images from Unsplash. And so Unsplash is a free sort of stock service, if you're not aware of it. It's got loads of great stuff. If you're sort of looking for sort of like free stock imagery, obviously there's Adobe stock as well if you want to get down the purchasing route. But this is really good especially for students, and just really high quality stuff that you can actually use. So what I've done is found a few images on there that I think actually really lend themselves well to mockups. And I guess for this one that we're going to be talking through, I've sort of looked for ones that are front on. There is sort of another level to the mockup experience, which is doing sort of more skewed, like angular stuff when you're actually working on a different surface.
Right.
For today's, we're going to work sort of front on, and I think that's a good starting point before you get into another dimension. So
Oh, Stephen, I think I might have lost your audio. Is your mic okay? Might need to reconnect. Let's pop this up while we do that. Yeah, no, I still can't hear you. You might need to leave and jump. You might need to leave and jump back in. I'm pretty sure he said I'll be right back. It's all good. Yeah, Unsplash is super cool. So Ahmed was saying that. Actually, our background image we grabbed from Unsplash as well. I think, Johanna, we have like a photo credit. It's really good. We'll use it all the time, like when we're just quickly wanting to throw stuff together. Obviously, we tend to use Adobe stock when we're doing commercial projects and then like getting the royalty rights and everything. Yeah.
How's this?
Oh, there you are.
Oh, sorry about that.
That was
quick. This is live television. This is what happens.
This is what happens.
All right. So that's a bit about Unsplash. We can jump back into Photoshop. So yeah, I've pulled a few that I think are sort of good, and so we're going to work with this one today. So we're going to grab that into Photoshop. And then I guess just giving it a bit of a scale, paying attention to the percentage as well, so we're not actually blowing it out beyond 100. Otherwise, we're going to get some distortion or some pixelization. And And I do want to sort of do this off center a bit, just so we actually have like a bit of a workspace.
And you don't have to worry about it being like 300. Like this is not something you're ever going to print, right? So you can. It's like 100% an online thing.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there are some cases when we would potentially need them for something printed, and so we usually make them sort of big-ish. Like this one at the moment is 3,000 by 2,000 pixels, which would translate not too badly, I guess, to a print. But we're not looking at doing them, huge. We usually, like 90% of the time, they would just be digital. So yeah, we wouldn't worry too much. If they were for something really like printed or something, we would probably just get them shot if we needed that work. So the mock-ups are really like a good interim for that.
Nice.
So we're gonna go into InDesign where we've made the Live, Laugh, Love mock-up creation.
I know you didn't, but I feel personally attacked that that's the phrase that you... I know it's not for my benefit at all, and I know you just thought it was funny, but it's like, oh my gosh.
This is going to be on Pinterest in no time.
No offense to anybody that has this as a tattoo.
If you have the mock-up as a tattoo as well, that's incredible. Wow. I want to see
Double down.
Yeah. To continue the her. So I've just copied all that over, and I'm just going to...
Yeah, your mic again. Now we're really live, laugh, laughing. Hey, Josie, in the chat. Whoops. Sorry, let me do this. Boop. I'll bring this over while you reconnect. Josie in the chat, Emily in the chat, all from Christopher Doyle Co. It's super cool. Usually when there's like an audio issue, usually blame the rosellas that land on my roof, but I think this might be Stephen's side.
Is that okay?
I can hear you now. Can you hear us?
The microphone's gone. We're trying new things. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. What was happening? Did the microphone get bumped out or something like that? And then
I'm not sure. It showed me a notification saying it had given up. So
okay.
We're going to give up on the microphone, I think, in turn.
We're going a cappella. Let's do this.
If you can harmonize, give me a G.
I can't harmonize. I can give you a C flat. That's the best I can do.
All right. All good. So I've got the artwork in Photoshop now, and I'm just going to give this like a scale to sort of what I feel is an appropriate level, sort of just as a flat. It doesn't really need to be too overthought. Whatever we sort of think is sort of the right limit there. And that to me sort of feels right. Again, basing it on what you sort of perceive as like what you see in the real world as well. It's kind of helpful for scale. Like you're not going to go so overshoot it and it feels really fake. But I think this feels like a good level for me, maybe a touch smaller. So from here, we can see in the properties window that we actually just have the numbers now of like of how big this is. So 758 by 1070. So we want to use that same value and create a shape layer, which will become which is going to become the frame. So if you just clicking down once, we can use those values. I've just lost them. 758 by 1070. So we now have that box as well. You can grab both of those and give them an official align in case you don't trust the smart snapping. So these two we now have aligned together. So using that rectangle that we just made, want to go back to the settings there and turn off the inner fill, and we want to give it an outer stroke. So again, in the properties, we get all the settings here. So we can change that thickness of that, but also looking at where that stroke's actually sitting. At the moment, it's actually sitting flush to the edge of the artwork.
Right.
So it's like chopping into a bit of the artwork. So we could either do it that way. We can go outwards, so it's actually like sitting flush on the edge, which might not exactly align because of the pixel alignment, or if it hasn't fully snapped. So I'm a little wary of doing it that way, because you might have a little gap, and especially down the line, we just want to do the safest option. So, which is actually the Goldilocks one in the middle.
Goldilocks, love it.
Yeah, which is where it does a bit on either side, and that's just very handy, because then you basically you're just covering up any little gaps, and you're not worrying about if anything overshoots or. So it just makes it really safe on that. So we basically got that aligned as that middle one. Have a look at what we think in terms of like if that frame feels like an appropriate thickness as well. Like maybe it needs like a tiny bit more on it to make it feel like a real mock-up. So we've got that frame set there. So from here, I do try and work as like non-destructively as possible, I guess I would say, like wanting to try and like use as many smart objects, smart layers, like all those sort of things, because it means that you can tweak things later. And in the same way, I guess, like when you think of like Illustrator and InDesign, a lot of that vector stuff is very good. Like that Photoshop's a little more risky because you're working pixels. If things get flattened, it's very hard to unflatten.
Unflatten.
So yeah, that's the official
It's
title.
the technical term.
Yeah, right. So I try and make them as like non-destructive as possible. And what's really great about Photoshop is sort of the ability to have smart objects and using masks as well. Help you do that. It just gives you like an undo essentially that you don't have otherwise. I'm just going to rename some of these so I don't get lost. We start adding in more layers. I might just lock that background. So from here we can make this artwork. We can. Yeah, at the moment it's a vector object because we brought it in from InDesign, so it's treating it as a vector.
Right.
What we actually want to do though is to right-click it and convert that to a smart object. Now that we've got it in place, we know where it's going to be. Like it's all good. We can convert that to a smart object. What this then allows is that if you double-click the icon for it, we're getting it like in its own layer. So that means that whatever we do on the main artboard, the actual original art isn't affected. We can still like go back and tweak that. We could drop new stuff in. That's the wrong window. So I've got another version just to again, wrong window. Another version just to show this sort of effect.
Right.
What I've also created this as an A4, which it isn't. I guess globally it's more of an Australian paper size, but I guess what's handy with this sort of thing, and when you do go to create your own mock-ups, creating it to a size that you use over time, so you can actually repurpose this down the line for future projects, or you could reinvent it or drop new stuff in. We find that really helpful just because it gives it like a lot of longevity. You're working to sort of standard sizes, just very easy to make it useful, I guess, down the line as well.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Like if that's something that you're used to, like in the US, it's like letter size is used a lot, which is a bit different to us, which is obviously A4, A3, A5, like it all scales up and scales down at the exact same ratio. Yeah.
So we can see here now that we've actually changed that in the smart object that it has been affected on the other artboard as well. So that's all working how we want it to, which is good.
Nice.
So that's now as a smart object. So just to renege on everything I said about not being destructive, unfortunately for the frame, we do need to rasterize it, which is a bit of a dirty word. It's
Sorry,
based
frame.
on everything that I just said. Actually, before I do rasterize it, I do want to just tweak that color, because something I think about mockups that's sets them apart is sort of paying attention to, I guess, to like real world scenarios and lighting and that sort of thing. It's very rare, I guess, in real world or even in photos to ever get like a pure black.
Right.
When you sort of like look at photography, even if you eyedrop it in sort of in Photoshop, often you aren't getting like a pure black. You're getting like greys and like purples and that sort of thing. So we want to do a similar thing here, which is to make sure this frame isn't like pure black. So
is that the same? Is that the same with whites as well? Like you kind of want to think like, is this like, I don't know, is this photo taken in the middle of the day? Like, you know, you weren't thinking about, I'm sure, might be jumping ahead with shadows and stuff, but yeah, like, are you thinking about that at the beginning when you're mocking it up? Like, obviously, if it was at night, you need to have lights on it and everything. Like, if it was during the day, you're thinking about the sun and all that stuff.
Definitely, yeah, and 100%. We'll talk about that in terms of like adding more effects onto it, but definitely something to think about in terms of what makes things look like it's a like vector image into like just sort of dumped on. You can really like, I guess, tell the difference with some of those things that do there is some sort of difference. It's hard to sort of always spot, and often it's those there's so many of those little things, but the whites and blacks are definitely one to watch out for, like bringing them both in a little bit into something else so they don't feel like a flat color. Even any of this here that we've got now, you know, like the artwork is these sort of blocks of color. There, any sort of, you know, even art on the street or anything, there is always sort of a block color. It never reads as that on your eyes. There's always a lighting effect or something on it. So
right.
We'll definitely get more into that. It's one definitely to be aware of, just to across everything, of how does the real world affect this stuff as well. So we're going to change that color to like just sort of a gray, maybe like a little bit of blue in it. And so that's now just like very much like an off black, but we'll add some more stuff into it as well. So we're going to rasterize that. Sorry, frame. And so from here, we'll work on the frame a bit. So with all the stuff that we mock up, there is this element of needing to distort the work a little bit and to sort of give it some artifact that it doesn't already have. And that actually just makes it weirdly feel more real. When everything's a little too crisp, a little too sharp, the whites are too white, the blacks are too black, all of that, then it does feel mocked up. So we always try and like just give it a little bit of like crunch and distortion, and then without obviously like ruining the integrity of live, laugh, love mock-up.
Right.
But you want to give it a little bit of grain. You can even see, I guess, in the photo here, there are some sort of artifacts around like all these details here. It's never completely crisp, whereas when we're looking at this frame that we've just created in here, that's like incredibly crisp. So we want to like give that a little bit of some sort of grain to it. So we're just going to use a bunch of different layer effects. So double clicking the layer, so you bring up your layer styles. The first one, right before this, I'm gonna just give it a tiny bit of distortion with the Gaussian blur, like sort of like a half point.
And this is the frame?
This is just the frame that we're working on. So it's just taken the edge off, literally.
We all like to take the edge off.
A tiny bit. And that's all we want to do to it. It's just like give it a tiny, I don't know how, but you can see the difference there. It's like so minor, but we just don't want that really like pointy, sharp pixel corner. So jumping back into layer styles. So we can just sort of work our way down the ones that I want to sort of pay attention to. So bevel and emboss, if used correctly, can be a very powerful tool. So there's a few different styles that you can do with bevel and emboss. You can get like a really metallic effect if you go like an actual emboss. You can get you can put it on the outer bevel. What we want to do though is to put it on this inner bevel, and we can see here how that's starting to look. And then we have sort of a highlight and a shadow going on here. So like the highlight, you can see it's now giving it actually this like really nice angular, like sort of a photo frame sort of connection, where you kind of are getting this like 45-degree angle line, which is really nice. So you can also change the lighting. So you could get more like on the side here, so it does feel like it's coming from the side. On this photo, I guess, that we're working on, there isn't really any clear light source. So, there's no heavy shadows that we're sort of looking at. You can sort of see under her, it's quite diffused.
It's like kind of a lunchtime overcast kind of day, presumably.
Yeah, so it's like it's overhead, it's pretty soft. I think that's one thing to look for if you are using supplied photography. If it's shot with any really hard shadows, you just want to make sure you follow the angle of that, and that's when those sort of light source angles come in really handy, because you can actually really affect that. And using the global light means any additional settings that you add, they just follow that angle. But for this that we're working on, we probably only need it to be just sort of from the top down.
Cool.
So we're just going to go 90 here. And then you can sort of see we've got this. The black, because the frame is already black, we're not really getting much on it in terms of like this reverse here, like underneath it. But the whites are what we're really like, I guess, getting from this here. And you can see also then it means on the bottom we're getting this bezel here as well, which is really nice. So it just gives it like a little bit of a highlight and gives it some depth, which is really handy. So we'll add that. We'll add a gradient overlay as well, which is to that point of never having sort of a flat block of color. We want to like give everything, like if the light source is coming from above but it's sort of diffused, you just want to have like a light gradient sort of coming over the top of that. Even in the way you could probably see like up here probably is darker than down here in the photo, so just doing a similar thing. So we'll just add in that as well. Sometimes it's handy just to have it at 100% opacity to really see what you're doing, and then to knock it back from there.
Right. Just go like full extreme just to see what it's affecting, and then bring it way back.
And then, So all I'm doing here is just putting in like a black to white gradient, and then sort of just turning that down. And you can see actually, if it is up, you can see sort of the darker shadow here as well. But obviously that's far too much. Like, we're not going to go that heavy. But the other one is flicking it on and off to make sure there is some sort of difference as well. And I think that's sort of like at a good level. Maybe just make it 10, a nice round number. So it's just making that sort of look a bit lighter from the top to the bottom there. So I think the frame's almost done. All that we want to do really now is add a little bit of noise into it, which again is just like adding a little bit of distortion, just to give it some, it just makes it feel a little more real. So we're just going to add like a tiny bit of noise, which you can sort of see if you click on the preview on and off, is like 2%. It's super tiny. Just means it's not like a hard block of color. Even around here, when you look at the wall that we're mocking this up on, there's sort of a modelly, sort of noisy feel in it. So any of that stuff just really helps. So that's the frame that we've got done there.
Nice. Yeah, it's kind of like counterintuitive to think like you want to blur it like a slight pixel and add noise and like make it imperfect, but that's actually what helps make it feel real to the eye. Even if you're not consciously thinking about it, but it's all this stuff that we're going to be doing together that will make you viewer think, oh, is that actually a mock-up, or is that real, or at least it looks really good, so it doesn't matter.
Exactly, yeah. The goal is really that it's not even a consideration that when you're presenting work, it's just no one's really looking at the mock-up at all.
Right.
The worst case, I guess, is just when it looks so out of place that it's jarring, and you just really want to make it like all blend in, and hopefully no one knows that you've mocked it up. The best mock-ups are the ones you don't notice. That's a new slogan that I'm working on.
That's a new slogan. I love it.
So we can move on to the art as well. So we're going to take a really similar approach with the art as well.
I'll just mention that we've got about 12, about 12 minutes until our designated Q&A break.
Perfect.
And Ian Hay in the chat says hello.
Oh, hi, Ian. So we're going to do a really similar approach with the artwork as well. So giving it some distortion to make it feel a little more real. So now that we've got a smart object here, it means that any of the effects that we do put on it, we can actually affect later as well, which is really handy. So we are going to add in a bit of a blur, but I think we're going to go like a little, we could give this a shot for now, maybe we go up to like 1, which seems really intense, but we're going to do something, again, a little counterintuitive, which is blurring it, but then also resharpening it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seems crazy.
It is crazy. The reason is because when we use something like an unsharp mask, it actually gives us these artifacts that we want to have, and it still get like a blurred edge, but then it gives us this new crispness. It's very difficult to rationalize why it makes it look good, but it does. I think the blur might have been too much. I'll show you. So that's now with a blur and an unsharp mask. So the unsharp mask, you want to keep the radius small, and then the amount you can sort of drag up and down. And again, you can, if you overshoot it, you can really see what it does. We don't want it to go that far. It looks a little intense, but we want to go blur it a little bit and sharpen it again. What the details I guess this gives, and we can see it by switching it on and off. Not sure how minor that changes if that's coming through, but it's a really light blurring. But what it gives us is actually you get sort of these little white glows and little inner hard lines on all the work, which actually is reflective of a photo. If you look at how even the work is photographed and how it like renders as a JPEG or anything, again, it's not hard lines. You get sort of weird shadowing and artifacting around it. It's all just like a tiny little bit of distortion to make it feel like it blends more into the environment. Really minor, feels counterproductive to blur it, resharpen it.
Yeah.
It's only really just to take the edge off. Like that should be the motto actually, is just taking the edge off. We don't want to go like overboard on any of it. It's all really minor touches to make it feel just a little more real.
Yeah, cool.
So maybe we turn that down a bit. The unsharp or the blur could go like a tiny fraction. So yeah, again, really handy to have smart filters and not be like ruining the work through anything destructive. We're not trying to create lots of layers and like experiment on top of it. We just want to like have one sort of central place, and we can keep tweaking that. The benefit as well that we converted this to a smart object is that if we put any new artwork in here, actually we can turn that on. When we come back over here, all of those things are already going to be applied to it as well. So like there is already a little blur applied on it and a little sharp as well. So super handy, go as non-destructive as you can.
Cool.
So load that a little bit. Just keep on it. Oh, we're going to keep fiddling with it. And now we want to add in, similar to what we did in the frame, like add in a little bit of noise onto that as well, just to give it, again, a little more texture. And it just takes the edge off those really big blocks of color, so it doesn't feel like a really strong hit. There is like a mottled sort of effect to it. Again, always just trying to like replicate sort of the real world as much as possible with that. So that's like a little touch on the sort of distortion and everything there. The final bit, and then we'll probably be going into a break, into a Q&A, is chucking in some shadows onto this now. So we've got this frame in this sort of context. The frame is really sitting on the outside, so there would actually be a bit of a shadow falling into the work as well. So we want to add some of those effects onto it as well. So again, double clicking it and bringing up our layer styles and adding an inner shadow. So let's just turn it up so we can see what we're looking at. So I like to add two shadows on these. One that's sort of a more like diffused, bigger one, because it's like it's almost like the edges curling into the frame. So there's like one that I like to have that's a little more soft and like just sort of rounds it all off, and I'll just try and like recreate that so we can see what that looks like, which is sort of adding more of a size to it, so it like creeps in a bit more. You could potentially pull the distance back so it's like more even. If we add distance, it's gonna drop down more from the top. Again, we've got this global light, so it means that all the lighting is actually consistent with the bevel and emboss, which is, it's all coming from top down, so that, which means the inner shadow then is going to fall from the top as well. So just making sure that's like all consistent, not trying to match two different things together. But we can probably just pull the distance back a little, and we've got this here. Obviously the opacity is like really intense, so let's just like pull that back a bit. And if we flick that on and off, you can just see it's like giving it just a little bit of depth, especially over here. You can sort of see how it like feels like it's starting to sort of curl into that. A nice recent-ish feature with Photoshop is that you can add multiple of the same layer style. I think traditionally it was only one at a time. So this is perfect for this sort of scenario where I want to add another one. Then you can click the plus. It's going to duplicate the exact style that you set up. But this is the second one I like to do, which is, first one sort of like a more diffuse one where it curls away. The second one is like a really hard line where the actual frame would like drop a little shadow from sort of here. So this one's going to be like sort of sharper and tighter. So really pulling like the distance in close, turning the size right down so we're getting like a harder line. It's not as like diffused. And so we can kind of get this sort of shadow going on here where it's like at the top, just adding in that top bit coming down from the light. So distance is close, the size is fairly small, and then we can like just sort of put down drag down the opacity a little bit. So that's like a bit on that inner shadow. So you can sort of see now it's got, if we flick those on and off with the eye over here, you can sort of see it's now starting to feel like it's actually inset into the frame, which is what we want it to feel like.
Yeah.
It's actually like got dimension and depth to it.
The depth, yeah, for sure.
One final layer effect that we'll put on it is another gradient overlay. So similar to how we set up that one on the frame. So we've got the light source coming from above. We don't want to have this as a single block of color. We want it to sort of get lighter to darker, but without being too much. So we're going to turn a gradient overlay on. We can see what this is looking like, but we don't actually want the black in it necessarily. So we can use this one, which is a feathered mask, and create a white feathered mask, making sure to change both of the stops to be white. So it's going to like feather from one, just from white out to nothing. But reversing that, turning off the reverse, so it is coming from the top down. So now we have this like very consistent gradient coming from the top. If you wanted to, you could change that sort of position, but I think it's fine how it is. We just really want to like now turn that down. I do like using ones like Screen or Lighten. They're quite handy sort of layer styles to use, because they also like do sort of affect the color a little more.
Right, so it's not just the flat white on top. It's diffusing into the artwork behind it.
Exactly. It feels like it is actually, it is connected. It is actually reacting to like what the actual art is. So that can be quite handy. But we want to turn it like right down so you aren't getting too much of it. So that's a 10 now. So you can see it's just taking like the edge off at the top. And what's nice now with the words is that there is actually a very slight gradation from like the top to the bottom, even if we eye drop. We're getting sort of from there up to there. You can see over here, like there is actually now a color change, which is really nice. Like that's what we want it to be, is to feel like it's actually got some sort of real light source hitting it. So that's the frame and the art,
cool.
Which might be a good place to pause, and then we can come back and do some more about shadows and other additional fun things.
Oh, awesome. Okay, that's great. That's great timing. I think we've got like a minute left on the rocket clock, which is super cool. So I'm bringing this up big now as well, so you can bring that up if you want to see the camera and everything now. We've had some great questions. Thanks, chat. There's been a lot in there. Let's start. Ines has a great question. Stephen, do you normally create mock-ups for your work from zero, or sometimes you adjust and change mock-ups available from other sites / people?
Yeah, it's a mix of both. Some of the ones that we shot at Central, we've taken and then sort of built those from scratch, similar to like a process like this.
Yeah.
But then often we've used other like stock photos and taken, like you can also build them in. Like all the stuff I'm doing now, you could essentially take a frame, like a pre-existing frame, take out all the art from it, put your own in, and then start adding in all your own sort of shadows and layers and everything like that. So I think there's a few ways to do it. A lot of the skills just end up being transferable to taking either if you're creating from scratch, or if you're like taking a pre-existing and putting your stuff over it. A lot of the same techniques just apply. I guess this is like the more comprehensive version, of just going from scratch. But yeah, we definitely use a mixture of both of those.
Yeah. And like when you're creating like this particular one, like will you create a new like mock-up per project, or do you use like, are you like, cool, I made this mock-up, I can use it across a couple of projects until I've like exhausted it? Or like what's the, like, are you creating libraries of the stuff, so you're like, yeah, I've got that A4, A5 mock-up ready to roll whenever you need it?
Yeah. It's definitely reuse, recycle. There's no single-use mock-ups. Yeah.
It's good.
We definitely use. Right. We definitely use them across different things. I don't think it matters too much. Maybe at the end we can. I'll one of the things we can talk about is like how to repurpose this for different scenarios. But yeah, we don't feel too worried about repeating them. If you have a look through the website, you might see a few familiar
recognize a couple of repeat appearances.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Josie was asking, does it matter what size the artwork is for your mock-up, asking for a friend?
Well, let your friend know that it does not matter what size the art is. I mean, yeah, if you're pulling it in from InDesign or whatever, no, it's totally fine. It could be sort of whatever size. You just want to make sure it's not, if it's anything like photography based, you're not trying to blow anything up bigger than like the source file, if that makes sense. But that gets into sort of like resolutions and DPIs and everything like that. But you never want to like extend an image that shouldn't be, and then it just starts getting very crunchy. And that's not the sort of artifacting that we're trying to create.
Have you ever mocked around with Dimension or any sort of 3D program?
Not with Dimension, the program, but Photoshop still does have, I guess, a lot of like handy tools in it as well to create sort of those perspective mock-ups as well. And so there's some on the site that we have that have been on a angle. They are a bit more, I guess, involved time-wise to get it right. But no, I haven't played around too much with Dimension. Maybe that's one coming up that I need to dig into. Need to follow some tutorials on.
Sneak preview to next week. We're actually going to be doing some 3D from scratch courses actually. So starting next week on Tuesday. Perfect. Tune in, same bat channel, same bat time. How do you? Deepak was asking, how do you choose fonts for your designs?
Interesting. I mean, this one that I'm working on now is from Klim in New Zealand, who we love, and a typeface called Untitled Sands.
I was almost wearing my Untitled t-shirt. I was wearing it yesterday. Yes.
I should have told you.
You should have.
We could have been on brand.
Could have been like, Klim, check it out.
So I think we sort of like a few foundries that we, I guess, trust and know that produce consistent quality work. Klim's like a great example of that. They make really beautiful typefaces and everything's really well crafted. And so I guess there's a few foundries that we trust and we know will just always produce high quality stuff. So I guess that's like a first go-to would be like, who are the foundries that constantly produce good work and good stuff, and then it's just really taste. I mean, like what gets you excited in with type, and how do you feel sort of that you can express yourself through it? That's such a hard one, I guess, to really like nail down. But there's so much out there that I'm sure there's something you'll be able to come across. The website Type Wolf is really great for identifying typefaces on the internet.
What was that? Type sort of Wolf?
Wolf. WOLF. They catalog a lot of typefaces on websites, and they annotate like what the typefaces are. That one's really handy, I guess, just to like, it's almost just like an inspiration gallery of like how other people use type.
Right.
And that can be really handy, just to go, oh, they're using that with this, or like, haven't seen this before, who's that foundry? That's, I find a nice entry point to like finding a lot more typefaces and seeing how other people use them. So stuff like that, handy.
Awesome. We'll take one more question. So in the industry, do you have to shoot a photo of a billboard or advertising board to make a mock-up?
No, and I guess that's why we're creating one from scratch now. All the stuff that I've sort of made with the frame and everything, you could adapt that to like another size. You know, that could be a big billboard. I think some of the stuff I was showing earlier with the Institute of Many Work was all horizontal billboarded, and all of that stuff was using really similar techniques to this, building a frame, putting it onto a wall, making it look real. Definitely don't need to shoot anything if you don't have the capacity to do that. I think you can, the tools in Photoshop are all there to like make something feel very close to you having shot it. And I think there's just so many resources on the internet with stock photography that you can easily compile that stuff.
Yeah, cool. Okay, great. Well, I think we should jump into part 2 to make sure that we have enough time to get through everything. Thanks for the questions, everybody. They're great questions. Still feel free to ask questions as we're going along. We'll try and sneak them in as we're going along. See if we can do it.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we've made the frame, we've made the smart object with the art, and we've got inner shadows going on all this. One more element I want to do on the art is to add a adjustment layer on top of it. So adjustment layers down here, again, being as non-destructive as possible. So we're not going to go onto the art and like actually affect that layer. Having it as a separate layer means we can like change our minds at any time. Also makes it really handy for when you put in new artwork, and often we find like with mockups we've already built, some of the settings don't then apply for the new stuff because the inner shadow might be really noticeable, or like there's something changes about it, or that maybe the gradient's like affecting something. So having everything to like go back on is super important, just so you're not like, just if you do want to use it for future stuff as well. So hue and saturation we have as a separate adjustment layer, and we're going to make it a clipping mask, so it only is affecting that art layer. Oh, go on.
I was just going to say, I think just an important point that I think that I've just picked up from what you were saying. Like, when you put your work in, it might not work. It might not look perfect just by constantly dumping work into the same mock-up, which could be there could be a lot of value in creating your own mock-up, so you understand what's happening a little bit more. But when you grab one from the internet and you haven't created it, like if you want to do a quick mock-up, that's great, but there's probably a lot of value in actually understanding exactly what all the adjustment layers are doing and everything, so you know, oh, that's a little bit off, the gradient's a little bit off, I know what to do to fix that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's spot on. I mean, some of the stuff you can download online is, there's loads of great stuff and mock-ups online, but yeah, it actually sometimes can be very disorientating to jump into another file, as I'm sure anyone's experienced. But you know, we've only just been walking through this, and we've already got a bunch of different styles going on, and I feel like they've been added very slowly, and like there isn't even that much going on. But it is actually quite strange to jump into another file, so you will understand the process and like some of these sort of tricks a lot more if you do sort of build them from scratch. Even if you're taking another person's frame, you know, and you're putting in your own art, that's still really handy, and you can then sort of like see what all the settings mean for yourself.
Yeah.
So we've got this hue saturation, and we're going to make it a clipping mask. I do like this shortcut, which is Command Option G, and you get a little arrow down here that shows that it's just hanging out on this one. The other way, of course, is to right click it, and you can create a clipping mask as well. So the reason I want to use the hue saturation is to, again, distort the work a little bit by taking out a bit of the color. And what that's really for is again, for that real world context, that the photos you find might have a bit of a grade on them, or they might be sort of colorized in a certain way. But also often if you're working digitally and then bringing it in, you get this sort of like RGB effect where some colors might be a little too intense, and there's a bit too much going on. So again, just like really minor, but we're just going to take out like a tiny bit of color, taking the edge off the hashtag, the now trending hashtag on Twitter, taking the edge off, and we can just make that like 7 or 8, super minor. But if I zoom in and we turn that on and off, you can see it just goes like from a little bit intense to like just a little less, which I think is sort of the right level, maybe a little less than that, but this means it's not overly bright. It doesn't take away from the work or like change the color massively. It's just that tiny little bit. So that's sort of all the art and the frame. We might just chuck all this in a group, so it's sort of out of the way for the moment, because we're going to work underneath this now. So we're going to make a shadow that comes underneath this. So we're going to do, again, 2 shadows, similar to how we have sort of like 2 inner shadows. We're going to actually have like a pretty similar thing, which is like one which is a little bit diffused, and then one which is more directional, which falls in line with all the other sort of lighting effects that we put into it. So we're not going to actually use the this as our shadow. What we're going to do is create like a box that will sit underneath it, and we'll blur that. And the reason that I like to do that is because you have more control as like a separate, when it's actually a separate object. if you do use sort of the inner shadow stuff that we did earlier, which is really great, it's using the confines of the box, which is actually, for that scenario, that's exactly what we want. We want the shadow to be like very mathematically inset. For the shadow underneath it though, we want to like a little bit more control with where we can move it if we wanted to like shift it or move it up, down, or make it sort of narrower. It's really handy to have shadows underneath as like a separate object that you can do. I think even if we just show, I guess maybe on the art layer, what a drop shadow would look like. Let's just have a look at this. So,
well, that's a serious drop shadow.
It's a serious drop shadow. But because of the way drop shadows work, that they take the art, the size of the layer, and they replicate that and that becomes a shadow. It sort of does a Gaussian even blur on that. It has applications definitely. For this though, it's a little too restrictive, and we want to use some other sort of shadowing effects. So we're going to ignore that for now, and create another shape that sort of just sits to the frame. It can sort of be any size like that.
And everything so far has been done mathematically off the frame, which I find really interesting. Like, this is like is this like the first shape that you've created? Like,
yeah.
I feel like everything else has just been from the main art board and then done mathematically, which I always love that idiot proof style of design where you're like, okay, cool, I know this is this, so if I do it this way, like, there's no room for error, and you just know that it's exactly right.
Yeah, this is a little freestyle. We're going off the grid.
We're going off grid. Oh my gosh.
So we can align those just so it's like we know it's centered and it's not going to like sit weirdly at all. So we've got that box. Let's convert it to smart objects so we can affect any of the effects later on that we'd like to do. So I'll put it behind the artwork, but I'll just sit it down a little bit so we'll be able to see what we're looking at. And then we're going to go into filter, into blur, and we're going to do motion blur. So motion blur gives it this like very directional shadowing, Gaussian, where like it goes out in every direction. It's a very even blur. But what motion blur does is just give us this like really nice up and down, which is really lovely. So again, the angle you can affect that to be whatever, but we're going to go 90. That sort of looks like a good distance. We could add it a little bit more if we want. And so we've kind of got this like shadow coming in. It feels like a little bit too far outwards. So I'm just going to like squish that in, but just holding shift and option. So option's doing it from the middle, shift is doing it proportionally. And so it's like it's inset a little bit here. What's a little bit intense with this is this hard line over here. So now that we've got this sort of directional shadow, we want to add in another blur onto the same layer, which is a Gaussian blur. So then this is going to start taking the edge off. Zoomed in a little too far.
Taking the edge off. That's the name of the show.
It really is. I need to find a new catchphrase.
I like
Anyone
it.
can help me. So you can see now we're still actually getting both of these shadows, which is really nice. So you're still getting this really strong downwards, but then you're getting it sort of softer on the edge as well. So you've just got both going on where it's actually very much feels like it's coming from above, but it doesn't have that sharp edge. And now because we've created this on its own layer, we can actually just shift this up and down quite easily, so we can sort of work out that distance that we want it to sit at. And maybe it does need to go back out like a little fraction. Might have overshot it. Again, I'm sorry, this isn't mathematical. This is an eyeball exercise. And
yeah, that's starting to feel pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's like in a good spot. So we can add a little bit of noise onto that as well, just to maybe make it blend a little bit more. Maybe you just want to add like a tiny bit, because we're working on a smart object. Like we've got, it's all going to be saved, so we can go back and edit it. It's got like a really tiny amount of noise on that. We could knock back the opacity. We could like just have a little play with that, like what's the right level. Might even add like a little bit more motion blur on it, which we can affect.
I've got a question. Deepak was asking, if you're not satisfied with the mock-up, what is the point where you should completely bin it and start from scratch? It's an interesting question. Is there a point of no return?
It is hard. I mean, it's I think it is one of those things that takes like practice looking at other people's mock-ups. Like the blog, Brand New, like it's under consideration, is the parent website, and Brand New is the sort of branding blog. They catalog a lot of branding projects and work, and that's actually a really good place to go to see other people's mock-ups, because often a lot of those are fakery, and it not only gives you like good inspiration of just how do people like present their work, but you can actually assess a lot of these things, like what looks real about this, like how, like even just looking at the shadows. Sometimes it's just really handy to like try and break down like what have they done there. Those sort of things are really handy, and I think it is a hard thing for yourself to know when it feels real, like when is that tipping point. I guess maybe showing it to someone else is often a good indication of if they think it looks good or like it's real. Right. Maybe it's probably in an okay place. So it's a really hard one, but I think it's definitely like a practice thing.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Good question. If there are any more questions, let us know. Ian Hayes said, can't wait for Stephen's new podcast, Putting the Edge On.
Taking the edge off after hours. So we've got that one shadow going on, which is really handy. We're going to do another one, which we could potentially, I might just rename these again. We can just dupe this layer. Command J is a good duplicate. So this second layer, we can keep the noise on. We're going to turn the motion blur off. Let's just turn this off for the minute, the bottom motion blur. And on this one, we're actually just going to get that more diffused, like sort of slight larger shadow. So we can actually add like more on this, and again, still having it on the down portion is quite nice, I feel like. So it's actually not going all the way up to the top there, because I guess there would be, in a real world context, there wouldn't be a shadow coming out the top of it. It would be all sort of being pushed downwards. So just like really thinking about that bottom like half there. Again, if we sort of like flick it on and off, you can see the level there. I'm going to move it a bit up, but now we just have like a little bit around these edges here, and because the shadow is so soft, you're not really getting too much of a noticeable shadow, which I think the drop shadow setting in the layer style, sometimes you can really like feel when there's a shadow. So we can drop that down again. I do like I've been doing this for the opacity, just using the number keys when you're on a layer. You can see actually shifts these up and down. So each of them corresponds to the 10%. So if you hit 3, it goes straight to 30%. Just a really handy little like one to jump around in case you're wondering how the opacity is shifting.
I like it.
So make that about like 50%, I think is like kind of a good level. So we've got that now. And then we can chuck our other motion blur back on. So we can sort of now like start assessing this as like, I guess to Deepak's point of, how do you know when it's sort of done. For me, I guess it's checking all those things, like does it have the inner shadow? Does the bevel and emboss sort of feel real? Does the frame feel real? Is the lighting too intense? Like I'm starting to think now, like the gradient over the work might be a little bit much. So we can go back into the art and just adjust that. So maybe let's just make that 8. But for me, that's like feeling in a good spot. So that's how I would set up one of these frames. What's handy from here is that we can actually take this and duplicate the whole thing. So like I've now got all these layers here. I'm going to group those and make them shadow. Tuck it into the frame, but make sure it's at the bottom. I'm not losing my clipping mask. So we've got this frame here. I'm going to call that frame I1. I'm going to dupe this whole frame and actually shift it off to the side. Can be really nice if you're showing multiple things, or there's like a lineup of posters or something like that. So just Command T, make sure you've got the group selected, and everything will come over with it. It's going to take all the styles. I can grab both of these and maybe like shift them back in a bit.
Would you ever cut out the figure and put them like subject select, pull the figure out and put them in front of the artwork?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, we could even do a little bit of that now. So if we were to just put it behind maybe her arm.
Computer's rendering a lot there. I like that. It's just like, whoa, give me a second.
That's the thing, I guess, when you do start getting into this, and especially if you're duplicating things, you're going to have a little bit of it will be rendering things because we're using smart filters, smart layers, and those sort of things. It's just, I guess, comes with the territory that you want to. You're going to start getting a little bit of that. So frame 1 is here. So we could actually put a layer mask on this whole frame. And this means we could actually start to slice out that whole layer out of frame there, which is really handy because it's affecting everything. Handy. It's like, it's the shadows, it's all of the layers. We're not having to do it layer by layer. It's just going on the group. The easier way, I guess, is to select that though, and which we can do quickly here. Is to use, I like using the pen tool for any of this selection. Just gives you a lot more control than say like the lasso tool, because you can. It behaves a little more like the Illustrator pen tool, where you've got curves and you can actually start to outline things. So let's just do a little.
Johanna was also asking, is there an uncanny valley for mockups?
Yeah, definitely. It is very hard to, a lot of it's like that feeling thing of just, does this feel real, which is a very hard thing to quantify, but definitely is an uncanny valley. I think what we do like to do is like not be too ambitious, I guess, with them, not trying to be too, that's just probably a good way to stop. To avoid any of those scenarios where you're not trying to pull off anything you can't quite yet, to slowly build up over time.
And I guess what you said at the beginning, like the goal is really that you can't really tell, or you're not even thinking about it. So when you see it, you're not thinking, oh, is that a mock-up or is that real? It sort of doesn't matter. It's just there and it looks right.
Mm-hmm. So we've got that as a path, but we'll go into paths, make that a selection. From here, we can delete her out of the mask there. So she's now on top of that. So again, we've got that as a we actually have that as a mask instead of, we're not deleting anything. We're not merging anything. Everything's still there. What's really nice as well is if you wanted to fully cut her out and have her on top, then this little link in here is something that's really nice with when you do get into layer masks. And when they're linked, they all move together. So you're always going to have this sort of chopped out effect over here. If you unlink these two, the art behaves independently behind. So we're actually getting, you could actually shift this and it's still actually moving behind her. So that is now like a fixed element, where we've actually like chopped her out. So that's really nice. So now that we've got two, we don't want them to be the same. But if we were to go into the smart object and change the artwork, because we've duplicated them, they are behaving the same. They're actually linked both to the same smart object, but we want to remove that so we can have like multiple art going on at the same time. So the way we do that is when we have a new smart object that we've duplicated, you can right click and get to new smart object via copy. And what this does is takes all the exact same effects you've already got, but just makes it its own independent file. You do get both of them here, so you can delete the old one because we're not going to need that anymore. You found the new art, which has art copy. And now if we go back into this file, we can turn off that top art, bring it back in, and we actually have both of them. Yeah. So awesome. Super easy. We've already made it once before, and now we're just duplicating the whole thing. So really handy.
That's so cool. It's like that's where like a lot of that hard work of putting everything together, and then like so quickly you're just applying it to a whole nother one.
Yeah, exactly. And that just helps with not being able to go back into your files and into all your layers and making things smart objects. It's just, it makes it so much easier, really quick to like put new things in here. The other version of this as well, to like sort of reinvent a mock-up, is to use some of the other photos that we came up with before. So maybe if we just switch some of that off. So what were some of the other wall versions that we found? Like there was this one. Finding like new textures or new walls that you could put them on that actually still fit all the same sort of lighting rules that you've already determined. So everything is like diffused coming down from the top. Really quick way to get new stuff in there as well. What was another one here? Yeah, so again, really quick, but you've already made it all. So I guess this is now a good example when you do like potentially use another background, like you can see maybe the shadow actually does feel like too intense.
Yeah, because is that a shadow up the top of the background image? So you kind of want to use that as your reference, right? Yeah,
exactly. That's a really hard shadow. This is now like a soft one. And so we could go back into like our shadow and actually, replicate this top one if we wanted. So that could actually be like, maybe it's like way less of this motion blur because it's actually like a much harder shadow. And then we could turn down some of this Gaussian. Probably even less of the motion.
Yeah, and it's so quick, and then just suddenly it looks much more in place.
Yeah, it's super easy to, and so then we've got a new, like already taking all the same stuff, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything. Just going back a few steps to where we were, and we're getting all the shortcuts on the left here.
all the Command Z's coming up.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. I love it. Like, I especially love the thinking about light and thinking about like where it is. Like, where the shadow is coming from for your mock-ups, like where the light is. Like again, like you're talking about, okay, this is a diffuse light. This is the one that we've built, and so you could go through and I'm not sure if Unsplash does it, but I know Adobe Stock does it. You can search for similar images as well. So you can very easily find like a whole archive of images with diffuse light from that first image, and then just throw them all in, and it'd look pretty great. Like you can very quickly make a lot of mock-ups. Definitely.
I mean, and another way to sort of do some of the lighting as well is to actually grab like another photo from a stock library, which you could actually use as like a reflection. So to get some of that more like real world lighting effect on it, it just gives it like other little elements and touches that make it feel real. We could just the photo is definitely not in the middle of Manhattan, but we can use it as an example. So if we're on this left one here, which is frame 2. So Chucky in this image, it seems really intense, and this isn't exactly the right image. You would want to find something maybe a little more chill or like streetscape that's a bit more simple. But again, using that as a clipping mask, and then you could have a play around with like some of the blending modes to find one that actually sort of does something right. These are obviously incredibly intense, but if you knock it right back, and potentially could even give it a blur or something.
That's cool. So it's like the reflection from what's happening on the poster.
Yeah. So we're getting actually like, it gives it like a more like glassy effect. And we've done this on some of the ones on our website. You could have a look at. But usually you want a more of a simple reflection. Like this is far too busy and like it's in the middle of the street. But something with like some sky in it and some darker foreground actually does the gradient that we were doing. It actually does that naturally because it already has both of those elements above and below, and it just gives it this sort of strange sheen that it now this feels like it's a glassy screen in front of the art. It's really interesting.
Oh man, that's awesome. Believe it or not, we are actually out of time.
Well, hopefully everyone picks something up and learns some ways to distort their work and make it feel real.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, it's super cool. I really hope you guys got a lot out of that. There's some great questions in there. Flick over to us. No, it's all good. We can flick over to us. Our big heads. Yeah, it was awesome. Always have a great time hanging out with you. And thank you everybody in chat for hanging out with us. Taking the edge off with Steve and Grace. I absolutely love the puns with you. Didn't disappoint as always. But yeah, like thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing like all that super valuable info. It was really cool.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And yeah, for all the fans listening, no, I think definitely those blogs are a great place to like keep seeing other stuff and maybe even having a dig on our website, see what we do can be handy. Everything's up for grabs. Take it all.
Check it out. That was super awesome. Thank you so much. I'm just gonna leave us and fade out with the schedule because in half an hour we're back. So I hope you guys can stick around or come back, have a coffee, come back in half an hour, hang out with us because we're doing some pattern illustration with Adriana Picker, which is going to be awesome. You're going to really enjoy it. You can check out some native Australian flora. I got that right. Yes, I did. Thank you so much again, Stephen. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's it.
Guys.